requirements might be. So,
Steve, is your microphone on?
yeah,
Okay. Just
sorry.
That's okay.
So I think you certainly could. I know he was just very nervous about the amount of information and detail that might come from it.
Because there may be more discussion and questions coming from that.
Yeah, you know, who's paying for what, and, you know, what gets put in, and,
But then wouldn't it be, the staff would bring it back if you weren't positively reviewing the transportation study? If our motion was pending positive review of that study by the staff, then you bring it back if you weren't positively reviewing it, or?
I guess maybe I'm not sure what time savings we would have then approving tonight then, if they still had to do some sort of,
Well, yeah, if there was a major hiccup, we'd have to come back and see it in a month.
Right.
If it's not, after we approve it tonight, and if it comes back next week and everything looks good, we can go.
well, I guess I would say, you know, we would have to be very clear about what we're defining as a major hiccup.
Yeah, that's
I just think some of that gets a little bit hairy for staff.
that's where I guess that's what I'm worried about is putting the discretion in the staff as to whether it's something that ought to come back to us or not, when really that's what the purview of the planning commission
Yeah, I
is.
kind of get it, it's a little bit unclear.
I will tell you that, again, describing this process is very positive, working with Clay and his team. He is fully aware of what we are recommending tonight and has not voiced an objection to me.
Okay.
All right.
Then I'm actually going to make a motion to postpone until our next regularly scheduled meeting, so that it guarantees that it comes back up on the agenda at that next meeting.
I'd
Support.
support
I'm
that.
going to throw this out there that we are actually meeting a week later next month, just so you are aware.
What's the date of our next meeting?
It would be May 9th, but that's Tulip Time Week, and we decided to postpone that meeting until May 16th.
May 16th. So I would amend my motion. Hasn't been seconded yet, I don't think. Amend my motion to postpone this until our next meeting, which is scheduled for May 16 of 2023.
Support, second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right. Thanks, Mallory, and thank you for coming in. Yes. All right, next item is 387 West 17th Street, request to rezone the property from traditional neighborhood residential TNR to neighborhood mixed use NMU for an event venue use. The applicant is Candace and Brian Grant. I am going to read the next item if that's okay, or should I do them separately? No, they go together, but we will make separate motions on them. 387 West 17th Street site plan review and special land use request to repurpose the existing home into an event venue getting ready space for Port 393. Applicant is Candace and Brian Grant. And you are present. So
Yes.
for the record, could you just state your names?
Yes, I am Candace Grant.
And I'm Brian Grant. Thank you for having us tonight.
Thank you for having us back. So just for the public, as a quick recap, we want to purchase this home and use it as a getting ready space. We've owned and operated Port 393 since March of 2020 and have just our business has taken off and we have become very popular. So this would be a wonderful way to expand our offering to our clients. So since our last study session with you all here, I have met with the South Shore District, and I am the vice chair of that. I shared with them everything that we want to do and have signatures from the group supporting that they want us to be able to do this. We've also hosted a public open house, and every single person that attended was in favor of this. It was only 2 people, but they were in favor. And
Were they neighbors?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So it was neighbors from 376 West 17th Street, husband and wife. They came in, watched the whole presentation. We probably spent 20 minutes just talking with them. Wonderful people, care so much about this neighborhood. They've lived there for forever, and they heard what we want to do, and they were absolutely thrilled.
Sort of. Their first concern was if we were gonna turn it into parking. Once we said we were gonna make it a beautiful green space and put a lot of money into the home, then they were excited for us.
Yes, yes. So they've signed that as well. I think that is about it since the study group.
Probably the only thing in addition to that that's come up that's somewhat unique is that the home is being sold through a conservatorship. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. So we just want to make you aware of that we have a binding sales agreement through the conservator who is appointed by a court. So we just want to kind of give you all that paperwork so everybody's in accordance with that.
Could I hand these out to you?
You can give them to
Okay, thank
Steve, yeah. All right.
That's really the only new news for you guys, unless you have any other further questions for us at all.
Just for clarification, because last time was a study session, this would be a space for the people using your main building to be
Yes.
able to get ready. It wouldn't have a kitchen necessarily, it would have a bathroom and a living space, if you want to expand on that, and then a little bit about the landscaping.
Perfect. So yes, thank you, Steve. That is the landscape plan. But yeah, so we would just make this whole property beautiful, invest quite a bit of money into it. The inside would just be living space, a very small kitchenette, no cooking happens here. The restroom would just be a half bath. Our clients would use it. It would not be anything that we're charging them for. They would just come in and use it while they're getting ready. And they would come in usually at 9 a.m. We don't let them in any earlier than that, and that's what we've been doing at our other location too. And then when they're ready and their event happens, we'll clear out that space, lock the space up, and nobody will be there for the remainder of the day. So,
Essentially just on wedding days, so typically Friday, Saturday, some Sundays from 9 a.m. till roughly 5 p.m. And when they go to the ceremony, all of their items must be out and it's locked. There'll be no beds in there, nobody will be staying overnight. And then just the outdoor area, we really want to put a ton of money into it. Couples really like green spaces. And so the couple who came and was a part of that study group, they were excited to have more green space in this community.
and along the east side of that property, we would like to put a fence up and just add a lot of trees and shrubs and plants just to further create.
Separation, if you will.
Yes. From the main building, so,
Great. Thank you very much.
yes.
Does anyone have any questions for the applicant? No?
I mean, the only thing I wanted to say is in the packet, you also showed pictures of Ivy House, their other location, because there were some questions last time about managing multiple locations, so just wanted
Yes.
everyone to make sure they
Thank you,
saw that
Jennifer.
and what it looks like.
Yes, so that is the other location, and there we actually have two separate suites that we manage, and the exact same thing, they come in at 9 a.m., and then when it's time for the event, they leave, take all of their belongings, and both of those are locked as well.
These are the two getting ready, they're labeled getting ready suites.
Yes.
My apologies.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Yes. Steve, did you have anything to add on this item?
Sure, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think this one is important to remember that there really are two distinct things happening here. There's the rezoning, and then there's the site plan special land use. So the event venue is a special land use permit allowance in the NMU, but it has to be rezoned to NMU. So I do have, I did put in here a couple slides just to give you a little bit of information here. So when we look at the zoning map there on the right-hand side, you can see The current site is already zoned NMU. As you mentioned earlier, this is in the TNR zoning district. That's that tan color. And then to the north, DeBoer Bakery is in the PUD. That's that little bit darker color. And then to the west and a little bit to the north and east, you see that blue. That's that RMU, the redevelopment mixed use zoning district. So the future land use is really that tool we use to guide kind of these sorts of decisions. And so it's just kind of interesting to look at that because we had most of that property that I just mentioned along 16th Street and Cleveland there in the industrial zoning district. And when we did the zoning map with Udo is where we came up with what we have today. And one interesting detail with that is that you do notice that when we rezoned the existing facility, we did include that leg that went down Cleveland that was in that TNR zoning district, which I think is really just the parking for the facility out there. So I think this map, if nothing else, illustrates the reason why we're going through a little bit of that master plan update to refresh things, to really have it come back into alignment with all of the changes that were made during the Udo process. So it probably doesn't give you a whole lot of guidance in regards to this particular rezoning, but at least in terms of the way the staff looked at that was the NMU area in here, including this property at 387, we thought made sense in the sense for what we were already doing as a part of that Udo process, that it would really make a true usable area here at that corner for the NMU. I did blow it out here a little bit so you could sort of see a bigger perspective. Some of these other areas that maybe have similar circumstances where you would have the ability to do something at a corner. I think that sliver that goes down Cleveland is about 40 feet wide, so it really wouldn't give much opportunity to really do something with that particular piece. So that was one important detail I wanted to make sure to point out. I was pointing out in the staff report as well that as a result of it going to NMU, you're gonna talk about or think about, well, how does it mash up with some of those NMU requirements? The home is a little bit further beyond, it's set a little bit further back than what we would have in the NMU district. There isn't as much glass on that front of the building, so certainly those two things would become non-conforming. They're not doing anything to the building that we think triggers the need to upgrade. I guess think of the Dollar General that we just had. We didn't have them upgrade the old part of the building, but we had them upgrade where they were doing an addition, and so they're simply just not doing an addition here. But a couple of these things would become non-conforming as a result of going to NMU. Again, as I kind of took a look at this and maybe looking at the intent of the NMU, I guess I was thinking that, well, if it was a home and it's gonna still look like that, at least in my mind, I guess I felt like that was really meeting a lot of that intent of some of those design requirements from the NMU zoning district. So I know I gave you, a lot of different sections and things to look at. But again, I guess it's just important to remember that the rezoning is a separate action item. You really can't make conditions on the rezone. That's an up or down. And then I did have some conditions there as it results to the site plan. And so I guess I'm just making sure that that's an important distinction that I think we need to make sure to make as you kind of have those two separate actions.
And to clarify that if we were to rezone this, it would permanently stay that way whether they did the project or not.
That's right. That's an important piece. And maybe just so we're really technically correct, you're making a recommendation to City Council on the rezone. So you aren't rezoning it. You are making a recommendation to City Council. As I put in the staff report, you can certainly approve the special use in the site plan for the event venue site. And I did include that language on there, that approval of the site plan and special use is then, of course, contingent on City Council approving the rezoning if that's what you chose to do. But You're right, if it was rezoned then by city council, then this becomes an NMU piece of property, whether these folks are here or not.
Correct. Thank you, Steve. Any questions for Steve? No? All right, you can have a seat.
Okay,
Thank
thank you.
I move we make a recommendation.
Hold on, we need a public
yet?
hearing on
Oh,
this
that's
item.
right, we need a public hearing, sorry.
Yes. At this time, if you would like to speak either, do I have to do separate public hearings or no?
Well,
Yes? Okay. All right. I will open a public hearing to item C, which is the rezoning at this time. So anyone in the audience that would like to come forward about that, they may do so now. No? Okay, I will close the public hearing on that item. So now we will have discussion, because we do have to do separate motions.
we should, yeah.
Yes. Any discussion on this
Go
item?
ahead and make the motion.
We had a lot of discussion at our
Study session.
study
A lot of
session,
discussion, a lot of
so
questions
for
at the.
record, I mean,
Sure, I
it'd
would
be
ju-
good to rehash that.
Absolutely. Honestly, I had a little bit of trepidation about this initially because I pictured it the way I had seen a lot of wedding venues where groomsmen were running free and loose and at all hours, and not that groomsmen are can be the only offenders at weddings. But when I heard the way that they intend to use this, and this isn't necessarily the rezoning issue, but goes along to it as well. But I guess I'll reserve my comments to the rezoning. When I look at the future land use map, and my initial comment was, boy, did we mess that up with doing that line and leaving that little sliver that's currently the parking lot out of what had been the industrial. And that future land use map is about 5 years old now, right?
Right.
We went through the UDO process after this. There's been a lot of change in this neighborhood during the course of those 5 years. There's been a lot of revitalization. Port 393 has been part of that. DeBoer has been part of that. This is a changing area, and I think that it makes a whole lot of sense for this parcel to be part of that change. It's got that parking lot right next to it. It's got the ability to be a little bit more of a buffer to the other areas. This property's been for sale. I don't think that somebody that's been interested in a residential use, they've got the opportunity to be able to purchase it as well. And obviously there isn't somebody out there that's as interested in it anyway as the applicant is in it. So I think from a rezoning perspective, I think the rezoning makes sense, regardless of what the actual use on this property ends up being. I think neighborhood mixed use makes sense for this parcel where it's placed.
I would agree, just because of the placement of where it is. If it was in the middle of a block, of a residential block, it would not make sense. It's on a corner, there's a parking lot across the street, and there's 2 other industrial buildings on the other corners.
And commercial right behind it.
Right.
Yes,
It just
exactly.
makes for a larger NMU.
Mhm.
I move we forward a recommendation to City Council for the rezoning of 387 West 17th Street from TNR to NMU.
And I support that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. None opposed. All right. That is item C. Now we will move on to item D, which is the site plan and special land use request. And at this time, I will open a public hearing on this item. You can come forward and speak. No? Okay, I will close the public hearing. Discussion on this item.
If council decides to make the rezoning change here, I think that this site plan makes a whole lot of sense. So I do think that it's important that our site plan approval is contingent upon the approval of the rezoning by city council. And as I had said in the previous discussion, I had trepidation about this type of use in a neighborhood. But hearing the way that they're planning on using it, what they're planning on doing with it, that it's not going to be parking, it's going to be a lot of green space. I think that even if they end up not continuing to have this as a wedding venue, I think that the type of use that they're putting together here is something that will continue beyond, and that this is going to be a permanent change for the better in the type of use that's here. And
Sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, does anyone else have any comments? But no?
So to that effect, I would Move that we approve the site plan and special land use for the event venue at 387 West 17th Street. We approve the site plan with the comments and conditions noted in the staff report, and that approval of the site plan and special land use is contingent upon the approval of the rezoning by the Holland City Council.
Support.
That was supported. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. None opposed. All right. Thank you very much for coming in. All right. Moving on to the next item, letter E. Udo, round 8. Is that 8, Steve? We're at 8?
Teaching us our Roman numerals.
Yes. Text amendments to Article 3, Form-Based Code of Chapter 39 Unified Development Ordinance regarding the South Shore Village Sub-District.
So I think the way we've been doing these is we've broken out the items that we think are a little bit more substantial than just corrections. So that's what we tried to illustrate by breaking out the South Shore Village and the snow melt section. But I think for presentation purposes, we've just been rolling through the whole thing, and then you guys have done separate motions as it reflects to these 3 items. So if that's all right, we'll just continue that way.
Mm-hmm, yep.
All right. And I do appreciate your patience with this. So you adopted Udo in August of 21. I got here in September, and we have been rolling through these edits
Revisions ever since.
So I do appreciate your patience with this. We're really hoping that Udo 8, I don't want to say is the end, right? But that it won't be as common of occurrence. So I think the success of Udo is really, based in large part because you're willing to put up with me doing all of these amendment meetings.
I think the hard work is actually going over it over and over and over again and finding revisions that need to be made.
Yeah.
So
I was going to say the same thing. We
Yes.
really appreciate it. And as one of 2 people who generally gets to hear these presentations 4 times, I really appreciate the great work that you guys are doing, because we hear it here at a study session and then at a regular meeting, and then council gets it a next time at a study session and a regular meeting. So by the time I hear it for the 4th time, I really know what it is that you're doing. And this is really good work, and we appreciate it. It shows the dedication of the staff to making sure that we get this right, and that, we can still find places that we can improve it. So I appreciate that too.
Well, I'm glad Trisha's here because she gets
Tricia is present.
She gets the MVP award for Udo. So, rolling through here. So this first change is just an edit to the graphic to really show just a slightly different graphic that includes I don't want to call it a change, but really an update to how we look at flag lots. So you can kind of see in the middle here, it's in the current one. This is what you would see as a traditional flag lot. We wanted to add this one over here because that is also a flag lot. So that graphic is just being updated really to illustrate a couple different kinds of flag lot, and you'll see that theme kind of through some of these other changes. So the city attorney has also reviewed these changes since you last saw them. So there are a few slight revisions to what you have seen before. This section in particular, he actually took out some language. So this is where we are talking about how to calculate lot area. And so that's really what the changes that you see in red here. And again, those will reflect later on in the code as well. So again, just trying to build some consistency here with how we calculate lot area. And then you can see here some changes, some corrections to the graphic. The front setback is really parallel to the road, not just necessarily side to side. So that is happening with that graphic change and some of the text change that you see up above. So a lot of these changes were really coming from the transportation department, so that'll sort of be a theme throughout here. So some of the things that they had asked for was just some clarification on with you know, and we've been doing this elsewhere where we're adding references so people can find other sections of the code. This corner vision clearance is an example. This is also an example of where the city attorney changed the language slightly. So we weren't just using a reference, but we were just telling people that there are similar types of regulations found in some of these other sections. Fire access. So I tried to just blow up the graphic because I know it's so small that we would add, but that on the right-hand side is just the graphic that we would be adding. And essentially what this is changing, or what it's showing you, is that the minimum width for these fire access roads is really 20 feet, but it has to go out to 26 feet at a certain point where there's fire hydrants. And for a certain distance there, that's a graphic that comes from the fire code. So we wanted to make the change in that section to make sure that was a little bit, I'll say it's more correct, I guess, than the existing language that just said it was 26 feet. So we think by adding this graphic and by changing that text, it cleans that up to make that a little bit more clear. Snow melt. I think I made the comment at the study session that, you know, one of the first things you learn when you come to Holland is about the snow melt system. So we didn't have anything in our UDO about the snow melt. So we wanted to add this language as well as the graphic so you could see where the system is. And really what the text is telling you is that we don't want people to be cutting into snow melt when they do a development or a redevelopment. And we're also concerned about, you know, you could actually have maybe too many easements that would come through the back door, if you will, that may prevent the development or redevelopment of those parcels. So we're really saying we don't want that. But if our city engineer determines that that's how it's got to be, that we wanted to have that language in there that would really give those guys the ability to say, hey, you can't do that, or if you are going to do it, it's got to be done a certain way. So that was the attempt at drafting that language. And again, I know that's a little bit different if you remember kind of what that looked like before. City attorney kind of cleaned up that section as well. Does that one make sense? I know that was a little bit of a bigger change. Swimming pools and hot tubs, these are accessory structures allowed in setbacks. So I think we talked about this before, about just making sure to add saunas in that list under additional requirements. So swimming pools, hot tubs, and saunas would all be treated the same way. So again, in some of our transportation requirements in Chapter 10 here, the traffic study requirement, we're just referring back to that traffic study section in 505 rather than repeat, you know, that lengthy paragraph that's in 505. And then again, before we were talking about the fire access roads, so maybe think about that would be maybe at Menards or something around their building. This is about the streets, so our public roads. We wanted to have that same sort of flexibility and understanding that the road could be narrower than 26 feet, but at certain points it has to be at least that wide at the fire hydrants. So we wanted to add that similar language for the roads as well. And then you do see on that left column some changes with the infrastructure improvements and stormwater. Again, we think those are just clarifications. The stormwater is really wanting just to make sure that, again, we're kind of putting the developers on notice so they just can't miss those particular sections so that they're aware of those requirements and where to find them. You do see under that sub-base and aggregate base just that little asterisk there that you know, Brian wanted to make sure everybody understood that there could be some alterations to that depending on what they find in the soils there. So that, you know, they may need to require more sub-base if there's a situation that calls for it. Just a correction there at the bottom on that left-hand column about the Ottawa County Road Commission. It's not the Street Commission. Sidewalks, the sidewalk requirements, again, just some clarifications. that we think makes sense, but they're really not changes. Driveway requirement table. So really what this says is where the requirements come from, the MDOT rules and regulations, but then Brian or the city engineer would have the ability to alter those. But before, it just didn't really tell you where those requirements came from. Landscaping, snow storage areas. I think we talked a little bit about this during the study session. So these would be the areas, this is in the road, this is in the public road right of way, where we really were saying that you can't use rocks, they're prohibited. Again, seeking some flexibility to be able to, I used the example before, I think, of we're doing some of these rain gardens and some of those sorts of things that it might make sense to have some alternative landscaping materials. So we wanted to give ourselves the ability to do that, if that made sense. But again, this is in the road right of way, so these are in our streets. Making some corrections to some of these reference points. Again, they were just pointing you to a couple bad sections, so you see that in the chart, and then you see it over on that right-hand column. And then again, on the bottom in 1103 there is where we have some of that connection back to some of those first graphics about measuring lot width and property size. In that left-hand column under major street frontages, we think there was just an old version that maybe just didn't get corrected, so that sentence should just stop after residential properties. The rest of it would just be taken out, just a correction. So in the GMU, this is the process table that kind of tells people, you know, what process they're going to go to for their project. So I put the graphic on the right-hand side just so you could see what we were trying to build again is some consistency so that it's similar to how we're already doing it. And so that's what the purpose of putting that on the right-hand side of the screen. So in the GMU, which I guess I'm referring to that to be the left-hand column, these changes up at the top, one residential building with 1 to 4 units, that's approved by the zoning administrator. So that's kind of that basic level of approval process. If you skip down to where it says more than one residential building with 1 to 4 units, that would then move up to that next level, which would be the administrative staff approval for a project. So think of something with a couple of duplexes as part of their development. And then in the middle there, you see the new buildings with 5 or more residential dwelling units, basically like we saw tonight with some of the apartment projects, that would kick to the planning commission for approval. So again, we thought those changes would be much more consistent with how we treat similar projects and how we have it listed in our code already. Approving authorities. So the idea here was we've got several sections of the code that maybe refer to a staff person, in particular the fire marshal or the city engineer. And so rather than repeat everywhere those are mentioned, his or her designee, we wanted to have some language that would capture that, so that would be covered, if you will. I don't know if we all agreed that on what the best edit would be, but again, this was one that the city attorney had come up with to get us there, if you will. So we think this gets us there and provides that umbrella so that we would have that coverage if we needed it. Again, in that right-hand column, just some corrections. And that condominium rezoning, it's a correction and then an addition. And then just following that up in that PUD rezoning, just adding that other, it's that same reference that you see under the condominium rezoning. Flag lots. So again, kind of referring back to that, some of those initial changes. making some adjustment to this. The way it's worded right now is really goes along with that graphic where a flag lot is a building behind another building, but that isn't the only type of flag lot. I think I've been using the example of, you think of the cul-de-sac type of thing where maybe the lot flares out where you're not meeting your width requirement, but it flares out, and so you are a flag lot there as well. So it's not just a building behind another building. So we think this is the correct way to do that. And then on that right-hand side, we're really just, again, in the spirit of Udo, making sure that everybody understands, some of these requirements, that really putting people on notice that if you did a flag lot, meeting certain requirements, that it may require that fire access road, and showing them where to find some of those requirements so people would understand that. I think there's just a typo at the bottom on the left-hand side that we're fixing. And then adjusting the definition of flag lot, and then adding a definition for lot area so it would be clear how to calculate lot area. Along and within. So one of the things that the city attorney had recommended is when we were making these changes is they think it's a clarification to change that to along or within, because that's the way that the rest of that paragraph reads. And so they would like us to strike the and add the or. So these last edits are from South Shore Village. So as a result of you approving the South Shore Village plan, which, just to highlight a couple things here, the yellow buildings were intended that those could be residential uses. Some of the orange might be mixed use buildings. And then you do see, and I guess I'll make sure to point out that those buildings on 17th Street are really in a large part moving closer to 17th Street. And so in order to allow this kind of stuff to happen, we want to update the code to allow it to happen. So that's really why you see these changes coming. This is the South Shore Village District. So again, all of these changes are really just trying to implement those things on that plan. So we're adding the residential use as a use allowed in that South Shore Village. So those are all the boxes that you see there to go along with the table. So trying to build that consistency that you see with maybe some of those other form-based code, River, Michigan, the East Downtown in particular, those other residential uses that we're adding in South Shore Village would all be permitted uses. And then you kind of follow that up with all of the different frontage types to add those in as well. And then the table, again, the consistency with some of those other North Downtown, East Downtown form-based districts. And then the setback. So right now, 50 feet is the minimum, 55 feet is the maximum. If you can maybe remember, we had a lot of that discussion with the Dollar General building, but this would also cover those buildings on that north side of 17th Street, which none of those meet that requirement either. They're all closer. So really what we tried to do was come up with, treat the north side and the south side a little bit differently to kind of respect what's already out there on the north side, and then to try to get what we approved on that plan on the south side. And so what you see is a 20-foot minimum on the north side and a 30-foot maximum on the north side. We really think that would essentially have all of those buildings on the north side fall into compliance, with probably the exception of Jackie's Place. The north side is a little bit interesting just because of the way that slip street works through there, and that public sidewalk actually goes up and along the buildings. So the idea here is that if people gave us that easement like they've done already out there, that you could get that 20-foot setback with that sidewalk easement as part of your site plan. And one of the reasons why we wanted to make sure to add that particular arcade type development, that you might have something that you had the arcade over the walk, and maybe they'd have buildings over that as well. And then on the south side, just treating it a little bit more like we have in some of those other form-based codes with the minimum 5, maximum 10-foot setback on the south side. But again, the intent there was to just get what we approved in that plan. And then you just have a bunch of the same changes happening as a result of those edits. So that is round 8.
Whew. A lot of little edits there. Thanks, Steve. So what you covered covers E, F, and G on the schedule,
Yes,
correct? Okay. Am I allowed to do a public hearing for all 3?
Can I ask a question first? Is that all right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna go back to the pools and hot tubs and saunas. My question is on pools and hot tubs, I understand water, you wanna have the setback with saunas. So I think for pools, you have to be 3 feet from the rear and side, pools and hot tubs, and a minimum of 3 feet between structures. So with a sauna, you don't have that water risk. I'm again thinking of someone who has immune condition, wants to put this outside in the winter. They then have to go 3 feet from their house to get into the sauna. Is that correct? Without,
Come on up, Tricia.
I'm so glad I came, just to answer a question.
Yes.
So most of our setbacks, yes, it would apply to the house. Most of the setbacks apply to the side and rear property lines. So we want a little bit of green space between somebody's sauna and a fence or a shed or a garage for maintenance or painting. And then we wanted to make sure the saunas were covered because they do have a roof. So they can hold snow, they do shed rain, so we want to be cognizant of how that also falls on the property. So 3 feet is a pretty standard setback. So the specific section says that those items don't count toward your minimum accessory buildings on your property, but we do want to make sure that they maintain the setbacks from the house and the property lines.
Are they still allowed to add one on that is attached to their home?
Sure.
Okay.
that would be attached. But would it be 3 feet also between the structures on there? Because you just had the property line, not the 3 feet from the structure. Is that an addition too?
I know for in-ground pools, we typically recommend a setback equal to the depth closest to the house. So if you had a 10-foot deep pool, we would recommend a 10-foot setback from the house so it doesn't impact your foundation or have any structural impacts.
So that's the minimum, like 3 feet between structures is the minimum. That makes sense to me why saunas, given the pool setback, but we're just talking about the rear and the side of the property line, but actually it's 3 feet between structures as well, a minimum of 3 feet between structures as well, so should that also
It's a good question.
be added?
I know that we're more concerned about the property lines. Probably less concerned if you're putting a hot tub at your house that you have 3 feet, but I think most people do have 3 feet, just because there's,
Yeah, I was just looking, there's a handout from the city on pools and hot tubs. When I got when I had a pool, and it does
Awesome.
say it has that 3 feet between property lines, a minimum of 3 feet between property lines on it, so.
and Steve, does that section say structures too, or just property lines? I can't read it.
The G.
The current, yeah, the current amendment for,
Setback shall be set back a minimum of 3 feet from the rear and side property lines.
Right, it doesn't say anything about the structure.
Shall not be permitted in front or secondary street
I
yards.
think it will depend on the size of that structure.
for
A
accessory,
minimum, a
typical
minimum.
accessory buildings, yes. For sheds and garages, the size of the structure dictates setbacks. But specifically for pools, hot tubs, and saunas, I don't recall if there's another section in the code that specifically calls out a setback from another structure. So I guess if the planning commission had an opinion, we could definitely look into it and then add a note, either recommended change for this round or at some point in the future.
Okay, that could be part of the motion you're saying? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, or if you want us to look into it and get back to you with an answer, we can, or if you want to make a motion contingent on adding something or not adding something,
Specific, right,
we
okay,
can do that too.
all right.
I'm still in the dark there, because can a sauna be like at the end of a hallway? In other words, you just add a little piece on and there,
I asked Tricia if we could add it onto a home, and they still can do that, no
Yes,
no
you
problem.
can
Right.
attach it
Yes.
to your house. You could
Yes.
put it inside your house, it's no problem. You could attach
Yeah.
it.
But if it's not part of your house and it's, you know, in an individual building, you'd have to be 3 feet between the structures, so from the home, a minimum of 3 feet. according-
Typically, yeah.
Yeah.
But we would have to reread the code and see how that language reads. So if you have an opinion, if you don't think we should have a setback between the principal structure and a sauna, we can check, well, we'd have to check with the building code too and see if there's a requirement in the building code.
Yeah, so I'm thinking of the idea of you buy one of those half-barrel saunas and you push the back of it right up against the back of your garage or the back of your house and come out that way. I'm not sure I can see any problem with doing that. You know, not that I know anybody who has a hot tub in their backyard that's right up against the back wall of their house, but I know that that's been done. Yeah.
That's generally not good practice, because if you need to service it or run electrical lines or,
Oh, well, but if
Do
you've got it,
anything
if
for a
you've got
hot
it
tub.
oriented the correct way,
yeah.
yeah, that you can still have access to all of that.
okay.
Yeah, you have the other 3 sides.
Mhm.
Okay, thanks, Tricia. All right, I'm gonna open a public hearing on all 3 of these items. If anyone would like to speak to them, they can now. Okay, I will close the public hearing on all 3 items.
I move we approve item E, text amendments to Article 3, form-based code of Chapter 39 of the Unified Development Ordinance regarding the South Shore Village subdistrict.
Support.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. None.
I move we approve item F, Udo Round 8, addition of a new section 39-5.13 snowmelt to Article 5, site plan design review of Chapter 39 of the Unified Development Ordinance.
Support.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
And I move we approve item G, Udo Round 8, additional text amendments to Chapter 39 of the Unified Development Ordinance.
Support.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay. Moving on to the next section, communications and petitions, scheduling of public hearings.
I don't have anything.
None. Communications from commission members? None. Communications from staff?
Just a
And-
couple things real quick. We have the open house for the master plan Thursday, 4 to 6, here in this room. So there should be some fun exercises to do if you want to bring your friends. And then we have the special study session meeting as part of the master plan as well. And I think the agenda is goals and objectives discussion. So that's the April 25 extra special.
That's why I had that on my calendar.
Yeah.
Yes. That's just a study session though, correct?
It's just a study session.
It's open to the public, but there will be no comment or official meeting.
Right,
Okay.
right. Just kind of a working session to kind of go over those topics. So
Okay.
that's kind of what's coming.
And did you have something else on here? The
We just had that administrative site plan, which was something that came in. So that's just a spot we're putting those on the agenda, so you're aware of kind of the admin stuff that's coming through the office.
All right. Thank you. Motion for adjournment?
So moved.
You have to say it into the microphone, Dave.
Support.
All those in favor, say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Opposed, same sign? None. Okay.